Hello and welcome back. Once again, my name's Kara. This is a channel I use to document a low-buy project, even though I don't talk about it very often, because that low-buy project helps me to keep a really tight budget, which will help me to pay off my student loans, which will help me to finally live the life I want to live. um, it is Monday and I will post this on Thursday, so there's a little bit of a time lag. Anyway, Monday is the end of my weekend. My weekend is Sunday, Monday, and I took a huge bike ride earlier today and I'm really tired. But the nice thing is that, of course, that meant I got to take a shower and look halfway decent for this. So yeah, it's Monday afternoon. I'm completely exhausted, but I would love to continue telling you about the online free class about financial independence from the Choose FI Foundation. That's FI means financial independence, and even if that's not your immediate goal right now, they have great tools. And one of the tools was this 11 class online course for free. I put the address in my last video, but it is academy.choosefifoundation.org. And you can sign up for that free class with an email address and create your own password, and you're in. And there's also a community forum alongside it that I didn't use very often. When I signed into that and kind of looked around at the different discussion threads, I didn't spend a lot of time really trying to use it well, but I was just more interested in the classwork, and that stuff was great. And so today I wanted to share a couple of my favorite lessons and encourage you again to go give this thing a try. Yeah, the Academy dot, well, no, let's speak correctly so that the website address will work. academy.choosefifoundation.org. 11 separate units, but they have a 10-step foundation, or not foundation, a 10-step blueprint to FI. So the 11 classes kind of take it at a different pace, and they work through various steps in those lessons. So the fact that there are 10 steps in the blueprint doesn't automatically track to the number of classes that there are. But anyway, none of this matters. The classes are very intuitive. They walk through things from start to finish. I found it really easy to follow along with and use their tools. I loved it, and that's why I'm telling you about it. Okay, so there are these 10 steps in their blueprint to financial independence, and they're really basic. And I think I mentioned last week that some of what was in the course, were things that I had already kind of dealt with. And the first one is definitely that, where their first step in their blueprint is to track your spending for 90 days. Well, I was at a stage where that would have been the right thing to do quite a while ago. So I, of course, listened to their reasons why, but kind of just kept plowing right along. And you might find yourself that way for several lessons, but I definitely didn't need to really spend a ton of time in lesson number one. Or at least step number one. Lesson number one was fantastic. Lesson number one was about understanding why you want to become financially independent. And that's a great place for a class to begin, with kind of getting in touch with, why do you care about this? What are your reasons for wanting to get either financially independent or to achieve whatever your financial goal is? Knowing why and articulating it really clearly is great, because then when you reach setbacks, which of course happen, you can fall back and think about why it matters to you, and that will continue to motivate you to achieve your goal. So their first step in their blueprint is tracking spending for 90 days. The second thing is to save $1,000 as a crisis fund. That's also a great idea, and I had already done that. But it is really helpful to know that if some unexpected thing happened, whether it's, if I get in a fender bender, or, it's kind of hard to guess what else, but just in general, having a little cushion available so that you'd be able to take care of that immediate small crisis and keep going, and that it doesn't derail everything that you're trying to accomplish. So having $1,000 as a crisis fund. The third one is to commit to no new debt. And again, I'd already, in my own little heart of hearts, had made that commitment long ago. I will not be getting into any new debt unless it's for a house or land in the future, because I'm clearly not at that stage yet. But committing to no new debt, and especially no new consumer debt, no new credit cards, no additional making your debt situation worse if you're in one. And then the fourth step for them is to ask your employer if they do matching contributions to your retirement fund. I had talked to my employer about this a while ago and found that they do a match up to, I think, 5%. And so I increased my contribution up to 5% so that they would match it. And that's great, because otherwise I'm leaving money on the table that my employer is willing to give me. I want that. I want it all. And even if it's not cash that I can use today, it will turn into more for the future, which is great. So the fourth step for them is asking your employer about matching retirement contributions and meeting that and matching that, contributing whatever you need to get their full match. Do it. Do it. The fifth step in their blueprint to financial independence is the step that I'm actually on, and that is the step to pay off your debt. Pay off all of your debt, consumer debt, student loan debt. And they make an exception. They say pay off your student loans or your mortgage if the interest rate is over 5%. Well, I don't have a mortgage, but my student loans are unfortunately higher than 5%, and I want to pay them off anyway. So regardless of their caveat that you don't need to necessarily pay it all off right away if it's under 5%, I am definitely in the midst of the process of paying off my student loans. So that's the step that I'm on. And then the rest of the course, it got a little theoretical for me, because not only was I reflecting back on my reasons why I want to be financially independent and what kind of dreams and goals I actually have, but I was looking forward at these lessons and the things that they bring up and realizing, one, I still have quite a lot to learn, and two, like, they brought up great stuff that I had not thought about yet. So their sixth step is to save to complete a 3 to 6 month emergency fund. So my crisis fund, $1,000, mine's actually a little more than that. My crisis fund right now could probably get me through 2 months if my income disappeared. And I'd like it to be more. That would make me feel more secure. But I'm not going to build that until I get out of debt. And then I would probably want to save up something like 6 months. Like, I want a bigger security. I am just enough of an anxious, at least as far as finances go, I'm just anxious enough where I would rather have more saving that's ready to go if something happens. So I want a bigger emergency fund, but I'm not at the point of creating that yet. Right now I just have to rest, do what I'm supposed to do, pay off my debt, and rely on the fact that I do have some emergency savings. The day-to-day things that are happening don't derail my plan. But when I get done with my debt and I move into this step to save up for 3 to 6 months of expenses as an emergency fund, for me, probably more like 6 months, maybe even more. That'll be pretty good to do. And I don't know what my life will look like at that point, because at my current rate of being able to pay on my loans, if nothing were to change, if my income stayed the same, it will take me about 2.5 years from today to finish paying these off. And I don't know what my life will look like in 2.5 years. And then, so what kind of rent do I need to assume that I need to be able to cover? What kind of other expenses? What will groceries cost for me at that point? I don't know. So I don't know how big that fund will need to be, but I know that I will be leaning towards saving up 6 months of expenses at that time. Their next step in the roadmap to FI is their step 7, and this is to plan your savings roadmap. and I cannot remember the details of that lesson right now. 8 was evaluate insurance needs. And I really liked this lesson because I've always found insurance confusing. Um, but they taught that using insurance as a protective tool while you're becoming financially independent is great, but that part of the goal of financial independence is that you're in some ways self-insured. You will have enough money in reserve to cover your own, perhaps smaller properties, possessions from, destruction, rather than having renter's insurance forever. But that in the meantime, the things that you can't replace that are very valuable and that you need to continue on your way, insuring them is a good idea. So that was a helpful explanation. And I actually don't have renter's insurance right now. I hope the house doesn't fall down. The next one is planning for education or training that you might need. And I'm, as far as I know, done with education, and I don't have children yet, which I also don't expect, but anything could happen. And so if you did have children or you were planning on continuing your own education, that would be the point of planning how that would work. And of course, education and gaining skills is a great thing to do to be able to increase your income. And I do look into things like that. I like taking free classes online. I like learning new skills from people that I know, but I haven't pursued them in a really systematic way specifically to increase my income yet. Even though I'm kind of interested in some certificate programs, right now the expense of those certificate programs makes them sort of like not something I want to spend money on right now, but maybe when I'm out of debt and I feel a little more freedom in my budget, then maybe I would want to pursue a certificate. It's a question mark. It's a question mark how to make that work. But anyway, and then the final step in their blueprint to financial independence is to write an investment plan. And this was something that I was excited about last week when I saw that this was how their course ended. Writing your own investment plan and writing it so that you have some guardrails around yourself emotionally when things go badly, because they will, and they probably will go badly more than once in your life. And so to create your plan that will guide you, assuming that there will be hard times and assuming that there will be moments where you will want to change your course, but that might not be the best choice. It might not be the best choice. You might be driven by fear or other emotions at that moment. So to make your plan and set it before you're in the throes of strong emotions is great. I actually thought that before making this video, I would have had time to make my investment plan. I have not had that time. And they did a great job of walking you through these and helping you figure out what these steps might look like for you, but giving you plenty of space to know that it's going to be your blueprint to financial independence or whatever your goal might be. It's your pathway, and you can take all this information in and then make a plan that is yours and will work for what you want. Yay! I had a couple of favorite lessons, and they were actually fairly early in the course. I had to go back and look at when these were. And for me, actually, my favorite lesson was the second and the third one. The second one is about defining what financial independence means. And that was where, by outlining sort of the mathematical side of it and realizing that saving up to have a retirement or to save up to have financial independence is really just a function of some numbers. And I never realized this because it always seemed big and confusing and intimidating, but a lot of the numbers that are involved are numbers that you have control over. And so it was in that second lesson where they were just going through the videos, defining the terms, and sharing the relatively simple math that can give you the baseline for your plan. Of course, it gets more complicated later, but that relatively simple math at first, where you can still kind of wrap your human head around it. You don't need a calculator, you don't need giant algorithms of compounding interest and all of that. That was when I was realizing I really can make this happen. And even with a low income to start with, and even with being in debt right now, I really can make this happen. And the only example in my life that I've seen up close, my own family, is that of my parents always stressed about money and us as a family unit living paycheck to paycheck. And it was in the midst of this lesson that I realized not only I can do this, but that I can do my financial life differently than the only story I've seen. I really can do it differently, and it really is possible. And the best thing was realizing I'm already on the right track. I'm already doing things that are getting me going in the right direction. So it's very powerful, very empowering. I loved this class. Yeah. And my next favorite was a lesson. I think the title of the lesson is called "It's Not How Much You Make, It's How Much You Save." And these were just side-by-side lessons, lesson number 2 and lesson number 3. And they were both really empowering and helpful. But in this lesson, it's not how much you make, it's how much you save. There were a couple of charts that kind of blew my mind. Actually, just one. And it was a chart that demonstrated that if your savings, like the rate of your savings equals how many, like, that is the deciding factor in how many years it will take you to save up what you need to save for the lifestyle that you want to have. And again, it filled me with hope because I'm learning as I do this giant debt payoff and my goal is to use 75% of my income for debt. I have made that close. But even looking at a more realistic number of, say, 65 or 70%, not 75%, but even just 70%, which I've been much closer to most of these months, if I can get out of debt and save at that rate, and I don't know why I wouldn't. I mean, it's not like I'm going to get out of debt and start living hog wild. But I could be retired in 8 years. Like, what? And so this was a cool lesson. And of course, I mean, it depends on the cost of your desired lifestyle. And they had some calculators there ready to like take that all into consideration. And I used them a couple different times with different numbers based on some assumptions that I made about myself. But this was when I realized, again, not only can I do this, I can, even though I'm a later starter, this is still going to work out and be very good. This is still going to work out, and I will have lots of time in my lifetime to enjoy myself and to have the freedom and flexibility to just live how I want to live. I will not be a wage slave forever. And I don't feel like a slave now anyway, but people sometimes think of wage work that way. Even in the work that I'm doing, and even if I never got a raise again, I could get this done. I could get this done in about a decade, out of debt, and save up enough to then live at the level that I live, basically indefinitely. I can do that. And especially I can do that knowing that I probably will get some raises over time. And I continue to do side work. Of course, once the pandemic is over, that's when I can actually do side work. So, like, it's just an incredibly hopeful picture, actually, even though I am a later starter. I mean, I'm 37 and, have a negative net worth. but I'm not worried about that anymore. I know I can't slack off, but I also have no need to feel ashamed, and this is gonna be all right. This is something I can do something about, and it's great. Um, and what was fascinating was using that calculator. And so is a tool called On Trajectory, and it's a separate thing from the Choose FI Foundation, but they kind of endorse it as a tool. So On Trajectory is a lot of kind of fancy financial calculators, and they do a bunch of other stuff. They have a blog and a website, and you can pay a subscription to have continual monitoring of your financial progress, or you can just kind of click in and use their 14-day free trial. Hey, and just use the calculators and learn what you can learn for 14 days, and that's what I'm doing. um, and so at the present moment, I used my numbers, and they are falsely low expenses. Right now, my rent is way below market value because of the good people who are letting me rent a room in their house and how cheaply they are letting me do that. There's nowhere else in town that I could expect to pay this rent. I would be paying triple or more for the cheapest thing that I could find out there. So my living expenses are falsely low right now. And so when I put that into the financial calculator, and it, what is your income? What is your savings? What else do you already have saved up? How much is this and that? With these falsely low expenses, this was kind of adorable. It was like, oh, you'll be financially independent in 4.5 years. Well, that's cute, but it's not really the truth for my situation because I won't always live in this amazing situation. At some point, I will need to pay my own housing costs, and ideally, that would be for a house and whatnot. So I did a second run with what I think are more realistic numbers. I asked my sister how much she pays on her mortgage every month, and I used that number, and I just assumed, I probably won't have as big of a house, as big of a mortgage, etc. as her, but I just thought, why not use a crazy big number? And so in my second run through their On Trajectory calculator, I used a much higher number for the housing costs that I face. But I kept my income the same, which is pretty low. And I started from the same point that I am now with debt and everything. And in that calculation, it was still possible to be out of debt in 2.5 years, like I expect, and then ready to retire and have a fairly simple lifestyle within 8 years. And I'm totally okay with that. And I think I would even be able to do it faster if I can live here as long as possible, for one thing, and um, and work side gigs and have as much income as possible, even with this wonderful low stress lifestyle that I've got. Yeah, just I mean, I know that that's not absolute truth, and that I can't go like just assuming that in a decade or so everything will have worked out swimmingly. Like, there'll still be the process and the journey of living into this, but the fact that there's reason to be hopeful and reason to stay motivated that this can work out, and it can work out relatively quickly. That's fantastic. I mean, I would only be like 50-ish. Cool. And like, I got plans. I'm gonna kick it. I'm gonna have a great time. And being 50 and pretty much financially free, there's all kinds of time to do all kinds of good stuff. So that is a little bit about what I loved about the Choose Financial Independence Foundation's online academy, just a Financial Independence 101. Again, the address for that course is academy.choosefifoundation.org. And it was great. I hope that you enjoyed a little more of a review, and I hope that my own motivation level can like get through to you, and that like if you have a small income, I have a very small income. Like, I have a low income. I take home about $2,000 a month. period. That's what I can rely on. And that's if I make all 40 hours. Like on a week where I work 37 or 38, I notice it. So yeah, around $2,000 a month. And I pay $1,500 or so on a good month towards my student loans. I'm living on a quarter of what I make. I'm working really hard. But even on that small income, and being like admittedly so lucky about things like my living situation, um, on that small income, I can make this kind of progress, and you could too. I just think you probably could do so much more than you realize. I know there have been times in my life where I was making far more money, far more. In my first career, I was making at least 30% more, and closer to 40 by the end of the 5 years that I was doing that. Um, and then a year that I got to be a middle school librarian, that just was like mind-bogglingly lucrative to me. I had like a salary of $44,000, and I worked a side job at a restaurant that year. I mean, I have had other times in my life where I'm making enormous amounts of money compared to now, and I'm making more progress now because of the way I've decided to live and decided to manage my money and just be crazy about it. Get crazy about it. Get yourself out of debt. But I'm not telling you how to live your life. And of course, you could be in much more dire situation than me. And maybe your housing is inescapably more expensive. I get that. I get that my situation is unique. But it's not that rare to need to live on a small income. And I just encourage you to really take a hard look at it, and you can probably do a lot with what you've got. I, I challenge you to do that. And I also encourage you to look for resources like the Choose FI Foundation and others that I will probably talk about next week. There's at least 2 more things that I'd like to share with you, and I'll do quick reviews of them next week. You can get a lot done even if you have a small income. I double dare you. I'm doing it. So anyway, until next week, I hope you have a good week. I hope you're still staying safe. I realize you might be very, very stir crazy at home, and hang in there. Hang in there, and thank you for staying quarantined. Me as an essential worker at a grocery store, I will be doing my best to be safe at work so that you can come and get groceries, and then you go home, stay home, so that the store is as safe as possible for as long as possible. Have a good week. I will see you later.